Welcome back, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us again. I hope you all had a good lunch break. We got another exciting slate of programs for you this afternoon on the Spotlight stage. We're going to get things started with a panel discussion here with a group of global investors. We'll be discussing the state of e-learning and EdTech markets. So I'd like to introduce our moderator for this panel, Miho Tanaka. Joining her will be Michael Hock, Sandeep Aneja, and Marcus Riecke. Please give a warm round of applause for these guys. Thanks.
Thank you again for coming to join us. I guess to begin with, it would be great to maybe do a bit of further introduction for each of our very distinguished panel guests. So, Michael, if you'd like to start, and yeah.
Sure. I hope it works. So my name is Michael, Managing Director at Holtzbrinck Digital. I think at least the German guys here in the room do know Holtzbrinck, a large family-owned media company here in Germany, but also internationally. I think we are, in the meantime, well recognized because the Macmillan Group and also Springer Science do belong to the Holtzbrinck Publishing Group in the meantime. My brand, actually, Holtzbrinck Digital, is focusing on investments in 4 segments. We are focusing, of course, on education, digital education, otherwise I would not be here. We are also focusing on digital science, which is very close to education, and also digital publishing and digital health. We have offices in Boston, London, and Munich, a small team of 10 people. And our portfolio consists of 20 companies at the moment in these 4 segments: international companies in the States, in UK, and also in Central Europe. And with regard to the future investment strategy of Holtzbrinck Digital, I can let you know that we are pretty flexible, also doing VC-like early stage investments, minority stakes, but also are looking for mature businesses where we could be a path to exit for investors, for founders. So we are pretty flexible. We are not very transparent, to be honest. We are not a public company, but I think all the relevant questions you might have, of course, I'm happy to answer.
Excellent, Michael. So my name is Sandeep. I'm with Kaizen Private Equity. It's an Asia-focused, education-focused private equity and venture capital fund. Probably the only one in Asia right now. We invest in select countries, not yet China, but India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Malaysia, Singapore, Philippines, mostly English-speaking Asia, emerging Asia. We founded the firm 5 years ago to invest in education, part of which will be education delivery businesses, very brick and mortar focused, because there is a significant demand-supply gap in much of Asia, and a lot of the governments and public sector entities are unable to support the amount of education gap that exists in those markets. We also invest in innovative education companies, which are startups all the way to successful companies. We've made 9 investments so far, and have learned a lot of lessons by being part of such events. That's why we are here, because we believe being exposed to innovations that are taking place all over the world and learning from the audience, learning from the people out there who've built amazing companies enables us to be better investors. So our objective is to work closely with entrepreneurs and help them find paths of superior growth, partnerships, resources, human resource, talent, technology innovations. And therefore we've got good partnerships at this point with firms in Silicon Valley and also in Europe, because we believe the education innovation train, so to say, stops in all the geographies all over the world, and we need to be part of that. So we're here, happy to talk more about our investment philosophy and discuss what we like in the education investing space, from disruptions that are taking place and some very boring but very exciting future-looking companies that we can discuss as well. Thank you.
Right, I'm Marcus, and I'm still trying to figure out whether I'm Britney Spears today or Madonna with my microphone. I hope you can hear me. I'm an individual entrepreneur and investor, not really originally in the education space, but in various segments of the internet. But in the education space, I invested in a company called Iversity, which is Europe's largest MOOC platform, which I was CEO of, helped launch, have since then handed back the reins to the founders, and remain an investor, and believe that surely many of you are seeing this at the various sessions at this conference, that the one catalyst that has driven much of the excitement in EdTech in the last 5 years really is the phenomenon of MOOCs and where that's going. So that's my area of expertise. So thanks very much for having me.
Right. So EdTech, it's been seeing strong growth over the past 5 years. So there's been over a 500% increase in VC money going into EdTech startups over the past 5 years. As investors who've put money into those startups, why do you think that is? Why is so much more interest in investment for EdTech startups right now?
Well, I think our people were asking me just last week when I was at a conference in London, are we in an EdTech bubble, or have we seen an EdTech bubble in the last couple of years? And I said, no, I don't think so. I think we see, sorry for that word, still a kind of internet mobile bubble, and education or EdTech was one of the last segments which actually did pick up. So very, very immature with regard to digitalization prior to the MOOC wave, for example, or also other comparable waves, which then absorbed a lot of money, a lot of VC money. That's correct. So I think EdTech was late, but actually now it has started picking up, and also it did get a lot of funding. And on the other hand side, I think it also, the total education industry is, if you take the software part away, it's really still a business which is dominated by a few big publishers. And as we also have seen it in other media categories, the publishers, of course, want to defend their non-digital business. That, of course, is also difficult then for startups to grow up. And a lot of early stage EdTech companies which tried to do so 10, 15 years ago did fail because it was a kind of closed circle. They tried to sell to universities, academic institutions, to schools, but also to corporates, and it was actually not possible really to get in because the publishers did defend their area. So for that reason, it has picked up. I think there's still the best time looking forward in front of us. But I think overall, you have to be careful in which subsegment you're investing in, because some of the interesting topics will make it at the end of the day, but are overvalued.
Right. And so, Sandeep, why did you found Kaizen, which purely focuses on education?
So quickly, just taking off what Michael said, and I'll quickly answer the second question as well. So there are two types of investors who are currently, in our opinion, investing in EdTech. One set who believe that education is getting disrupted for the good, or the better, or worse, getting disrupted, period. Second set of investors, because they have a clear fear of missing out. They don't know what EdTech is, but they want to put money to work. So they're both, like any wave of investing, will have both types. The first type, at least we think we fall in that category. So we are very careful about EdTech. We just don't use it as a term as much as we can, because we don't think that there needs to be a term. But it's great, it attracts money. Let's focus a bit on that. Why? Traditional education is somewhat artificial. The moment you add a person to a classroom, somebody has to leave. There's a limited number of seats. EdTech can, in a utopia, take away that problem, and unlimited number of people can join a virtual classroom. EdTech enables us to break a traditional barrier of a 45-minute to a 60-minute class. Why? Not every student gets it in 45 minutes. Many are bored, many are excited, most are not engaged. So EdTech can bring personalization, can bring classroom limits in sizes and lengths, which excite students of all types to their learning ability. So personalization, expansion of a classroom to any level, and affordability, potentially. If the EdTech promise plays out, then you can, without any marginal cost, bring in a lot of students into the mainstream of education, and particularly for markets where building another big university or college is not possible, building an EdTech channel for exciting students to learn is possible. So it's a lower cost, theoretically lower cost method of bringing education to the masses. So that promise of personalization, massification of education for the first time, leveraging technology, is exciting for investors like us because we don't know where that leads. It could lead to a lot of value creation. It could lead to a lot more educated people, and doing good while doing well is a great idea for people like us, and therefore we like EdTech. Why we founded Kaizen, because we believe there is a significant amount of intelligent capital that needs to go behind in education. In education, primarily we believe the primary role of education being funded is by the public's taxes. But if that doesn't happen, people like us have to step in and bring in capital that brings value and the ability to operate a business as well, not just invest and sit back. And that kind of capital was missing from the markets, particularly in Asia. So when I came back to Asia after having spent time in Silicon Valley for 10 to 15 years, realized that it was the right thing to do, very exciting thing to do, to bring transformation and operations-driven investing into education. So hope that helps.
Well, the whole massification of education is completely your domain, Mike, I guess, with the MOOCs and being an investor in diversity. And we discussed earlier about the ups and downs of MOOCs over the years. Tell us a little bit more about how MOOCs has been evolving over the past 5 years.
Sure, I'd be happy to, from my perspective. But to quickly answer your question as well and build on what Michael and Sandeep have said, first of all, yes, a lot of money has been flowing into EdTech in the last 5 years, but not just into EdTech. I mean, since 2009, we live in a very low interest rate macroeconomy in the Western world. If you look at the other digital areas, they have gotten even more funding. If you look at valuations like Uber and so forth. So EdTech is just a sort of a natural outpouring because, as Sandeep has said, disruption is now clearly happening. And now to get to your point about MOOCs, the catalyst really was the MOOCs thing. Whatever you might think of it, clearly late 2011, early 2012, when Udacity popped up, when Coursera popped up, there was instantaneous understanding amongst savvy investors and entrepreneurs. It's now clearly, I mean, e-commerce has been disrupted, telecommunications have been disrupted, blah, 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 blah. Clearly, industry seems to be one of the next industries, education seems to be one of the next industries or parts of society which finally is going to face disruption. And that brings people who want to create value and who want to deploy capital in a meaningful way to the table. So I think that's the driver. And MOOCs, which as I've said, are, I believe, the catalyst and the excitement around EdTech in the last 5 years, exploded, attracted a lot of hype. A lot of the hype was justified, and now essentially stand at a sort of a slight deceleration point. There's a little bit of air going out of the balloon, very much to the satisfaction of the established incumbents. University professors who don't do MOOCs are terrified of MOOCs. Universities who don't do MOOCs are terrified of MOOCs. So there is an inherent interest in talking down the phenomenon. That said, the phenomenon has challenges, and they lie basically, to grossly oversimplify, in one particular area. University-level MOOCs, until this day, except for on diversity, do not offer academic credit. And therefore, it is actually not a comparable product to the offline degree or to the offline course. Therefore, there is no business model. That's the point, the point, the developmental stage that university-level MOOCs are stuck at is the absence of academic credit, which is why everyone, certainly in the established universities that are participating, is waiting for someone to take that first bold step. And the dynamics preventing that from happening until today are very easily explained. Again, to grossly oversimplify, clearly there are great universities in most countries of the world, but the greatest concentration of famous university institutions is in North America. We may not like that, but it's a fact. North American university institutions, even the so-called public ones, run themselves for profit. Now, MOOCs to them is a little bit like iTunes to the record labels 12 years ago. Why should I cannibalize my $22 CD and offer this song for 29 cents. So there's an element of unbundling. A previously bundled product is now being unbundled and delivered digitally at a dramatically lower price point, which can only work if a dramatically higher number of consumers actually purchase the product. I think the university level MOOC phenomenon is at the stage where someone is going to take the first step sooner or later, in fact it's happening now, to try MOOCs for credit online, which will then resolve a number of issues. First of all, many people complain that MOOCs, only a very small percentage of people who start MOOCs actually finish them. Well, clearly, if I don't get any credit for it, why should I finish it? So there's no incentive, there's insufficient incentive to finish the MOOC. So completion rates will increase. And secondly, the credit, of course, will lead to higher price points. So the MOOCs on Coursera that now cost $49, if they had MOOCs, I would argue, could easily be sold for the 4-5x price point. So I think that's the stage we're at. Second section answer to the MOOCs phenomenon is all the other MOOCs, all the non-university level MOOCs, which are basically vocational stuff on the job skills. They're completely different, even though they look the same. It's video format and it's online quizzes, but it's a completely different dynamic because these types of MOOC content are intellectually, academically, probably slightly a nudge below a Stanford philosophy of physics class, but they're immediately job applicable. I'm going to take this PowerPoint course on lynda.com, and if I can do PowerPoint better, I will get a raise. I mean, it's immediately job applicable. Credits do not matter. Nobody needs credit for a Code Academy class on Python. My employer will want to know, can I actually code Python? And lastly, I will pay up front. If I, as a consumer, am convinced that if I take this course in the evenings for the next 12 weeks, I can actually get that job in the marketing department, which I aspire towards. So those are the two buckets. So I think we've seen an explosion. We see a little bit of deceleration at the moment. We see non-university level MOOCs, so the vocational job applicable stuff, doing very well. Udacity is doing very well. Code Academy is doing well. My company has pivoted also more towards job relevant skills. We see Coursera, who could be the Facebook, Google of the space, sort of struggling to figure out how to make the university level MOOCs happen. That's my take on it.
It's interesting that you bring up quality and the price point that customers are willing to pay, and using the analogy of music that you brought up. So recently, I'm not sure if everybody's familiar with Tidal, where it was a music streaming company that was offering a higher price point but for a higher quality of music, and that company is still struggling to gain an audience because everyone is so used to having everything for free, and the same with the EdTech startups. They're all still struggling with the business models. How are you seeing your portfolio EdTech companies doing with the business models?
Well, monetization, of course, is for an investor the most relevant point, because at the end of the day, the ultimate valuation, the exit, is triggered by revenues, profits, cash flow, or at least a real possibility to have a commercialized product and service at the end of the day. What we have seen, and we started looking at EdTech roughly 2 years ago, we focused because our background was on B2C businesses. We had a diversified portfolio, e-commerce companies, marketplaces, online matchmaking. So we knew B2C very well, and we said, well, also in the EdTech space, we will focus on B2C because that's what we can, what we understand. And we realized pretty soon, especially here in German-speaking countries, overall in Europe, but especially in German-speaking countries, consumers are not willing to pay for education. It's difficult in the offline world, but it's impossible in the online world. Of course, you have the one or the other exemptions, but it's an overall rule. And then we realized, okay, then we have to learn B2B, because there are some success cases out there one might not have on the agenda because they're not the hyped ones here in Berlin or in London. They're more traditional players, and we are still having a look at them. We did not invest in them so far because they don't need our money, because they're profitable. Large companies with 200, 300, 400 people coming either from the offline education space. They had offline seminars and programs and have developed over time in the last 10, 15 years into the online world, having corporates as customers like Deutsche Bahn, like Mercedes and others, making a lot of money, profitable, and others also very successful, coming from the IT, from the software side, and have developed into solution providers. For example, one hidden champion, I think it's the largest pure EdTech company in Germany, is TTS in Heidelberg. No one knows them, I would assume, but they are making good money, very profitable, but being a hidden champion in the software space. In the meantime, develop into a service provider. And also, if you have a look at the great success stories internationally, Blackboard or other companies, they are doing B2B business mainly. There are some exemptions, and that's what we are focusing on in the B2C space. I'm saying we are still making also B2C business, but not as optimistic as we started, focusing on real pain points, because then there's a likelihood that also consumers are willing to pay. Exam preparation is a very good example. In case students have the possibility to get a better grade, for example, in the medical space or also in the law space, then they're willing to pay. Also in the offline world, but that can be transferred or has been transferred in the meantime into the online world. And we made just an investment last month, it is not public yet, actually a market leader in exam preparation for medical students here in Germany. Market share of 95%, making good money and now going international. Other segments working very well also in the B2C space are companies focusing on 21st century skills, IT, web development, UX design. You mentioned, Marcel, you mentioned Udacity, for example, or also other companies. I like a lot, for example, General Assembly in the US, really charging $5,000–6,000 US in the B2C space. Of course, they do not have a pure digital model; they have a blended model, but people are willing to pay for that. And here in Berlin, for example, there's a very interesting company called Career Foundry who tries the platform, the Career Changer platform for Europe at a lower price point, but still very, very interesting model. In our portfolio, we have a marketplace or kind of like a marketplace-like model, Lecturio, with a broad range of different courses. Also in the B2C space, we realized not everything worked. Medical, law, also software skills work very well, but what counts at the end of the day is quality. Mm-hmm. So for us, it's relevant. Is there real proof for commercialization? Does the company focus on quality? And do they serve a real pain point? That is the precondition for us, either in the B2B or in the B2C space.
Yeah, I think that's a very succinct answer. I'll just segment this into a 2x2 matrix. You either sell to a consumer or to an institution, B2C or B2B. And the way we see it in our portfolio is companies which are able to bring jobs or degrees or certifications to consumers generally have a chance of getting paid for that. Second, we're seeing companies, when they sell to institutions, if they quickly bring additional revenues to institutions or they direct them to an easier source of revenues, then institutions are likely to invest in that product or technology. Secondarily, if the companies can reduce costs and bring process efficiencies, that's much more of a developed market sale, but not in emerging markets where you need to bring revenues today. However, it's changing a little bit. A lot of developed markets have, particularly universities, have issues with profits, so they're looking for foreign students. So that's an exception where a lot of universities will pay a significant amount of capital money per student, and these are universities in the US, the UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, etc. So that's a pathways opportunity. Therefore, we see EdTech companies often confused with MOOCs. MOOC is not EdTech. MOOC is an example of EdTech, so let's be very clear. EdTech has to be very, very clear about business model from day one. And I love the expenditure that MOOCs are making online. It enables every other company to reduce their marketing and branding budgets because it enables everyone to sort of think, oh, well, I could have taken a course on a MOOC. It's not at the right time, right place, right quality, but I've got another for-pay provider locally. Maybe I should go for that because now online education is much more mainstream in everyone's thinking. So I like that a lot. is free marketing for our companies. So we think that it's just very simple. Stay with the tenets. Our companies have done really well. One company sells a DIY platform, do-it-yourself platform, such that anybody who is a latent English or science or mathematics or any kind of a tutor can quickly create a course online and get access to students within a matter of minutes. So you can be an entrepreneur in education if you're a really good English teacher, and they're doing quite well with that. A second company captures lectures in classrooms, puts the videos online. This is great in emerging markets. Students don't show up. They can review the lessons afterwards. They can catch up to exams. If you are a very smart student, I know you're going to watch this 10-minute segment. I can follow you. And I get your smartness through your viewing behavior. Teachers don't show up. Owners of universities, colleges can figure out which teacher showed up on time, didn't show up on time. And they are making really good money because they bring immediate differentiating value to that customer. So we like the idea of an EdTech player differentiating the ultimate buyer, whether that's a consumer or a business. And ultimately, going back to whether it's a B2C model or B2B model, each entity has to create a differentiated value based on the sale that they make to that entity. That's what we think. So.
It's interesting that you bring up your one of your portfolio companies, which is helping anybody to create their own course, because you also have a company like that on your portfolio, and as more of these companies pop up and with providers like, service providers like MOOC, is it a service provider? Is it correct to call it a service provider? So, yeah. I can just imagine the internet will soon be filled with, kind of like YouTube. Everyone, like right now, everybody is creating their own content and putting it out to YouTube. There's going to be a lot of these educational content where people are putting up. It's already up, but that's just going to grow. Do you think then that will replace universities in the end, or how do you see the face of education changing as more and more individuals upload their educational content on the internet for all to consume?
You want to go for that?
Sure, I'd be happy to. And Sandeep and I chatted about that earlier. I mean, and just to make this a bit controversial, I would argue every disruption that has thus far happened through the internet, regardless of what industry it was in large part about cutting out middlemen. And the more dramatically the middleman was cut out and consumer and producer, or consumer and manufacturer, or whatever, were connected, the more disruptive the impact. So to answer your question, what will happen to universities as a result of the EdTech phenomenon, of which MOOCs is an example, I think the following. I think that all institutions, all teaching institutions that do not engage run an enormous risk of missing the train. I think this is analogous, and it's a horrible thing to say, but I think it's true. This is analogous to what happened to the bookstore and Amazon. And I remember very well when I was still an employed guy at Bertelsmann, and I was an assistant to one of the board members, and this is 1995, Amazon had literally just launched and was really only selling books. And Bertelsmann at that time had a very online-savvy strategy and wanted to get into a sort of an Amazon-like book service called BOL. Some of you may remember this, since gone out of business. I remember talking to the large bookseller chains, which were big customers of Bertelsmann. Bertelsmann is a huge publisher, so obviously our customers were the big book retailers. And I remember the discussions I had with them at the time, and my boss said to me, you're going to have to convince them that they need to sell books online, like that Amazon company in the US. And I met I was 29, and I met all these people who are the age I am now, telling me, oh, come on, Marcus, I mean, that little bit of online books, that can never replace the bookstore. Nothing can substitute for the personal recommendations of your local bookseller. If only that had been true. We know it wasn't. And I know I'm purposely putting this provocatively. I think a similar thing will happen to universities if they do not do for lack of a better word, MOOCs. They will miss out. You have to acquire as a teaching institution, not to mention as an educator, you have to acquire the skill to deliver what it is you have to teach in the new medium. I think we will see a concentration on fewer, bigger, stronger university brands, and all the, especially in continental Europe, where we have a lot of state universities, we don't have, to contrast this with the Anglo-American world. In the Anglo-American world, and to some extent in emerging markets, you have definitely, overtly elite universities. You do not so much in Europe, to some extent, but to a lesser extent. The elite universities will benefit majorly from EdTech. They're already in the game. Harvard is already teaching online, so Stanford, all these guys are. In Germany, it's basically TU Munich and LMU Munich, which are also, incidentally, probably the most reputable German universities. This huge body of state-funded, sort of medium-range universities will run into huge issues on two fronts. First of all, there are some excellent professors and teachers at these mid-range universities, and they will get frustrated. They will get frustrated because their buddies at the top universities, they're going to be doing MOOCs and they're going to have 100,000 students, and they will want the same. The students will also get frustrated because they know the teaching that they receive at that mid-level university just isn't quite up to snuff. How do they know that? They go online, and they see what world-class versus mid-range classes. So I think we'll see, if the universities don't watch out, we'll see something maybe not quite as dramatic as in the book trade, maybe not as quite as quickly as in the book trade, but the same phenomenon occurring. You better jump on the bandwagon now, if you haven't done so already. You better do online education, MOOCs, now. The other thing that you need to do, especially continental European universities, you cannot be all things to all people. You have to pick your positioning. That's another phenomenon we have, especially in Germany, also in France, also in Italy, where universities offer everything. Bologna offers biology, I mean, every topic under the sun. No American university would do that. They pick their strengths, and in their strengths they're going to be world-class, but they will give up on some of the subject areas that they're not so strong in. So I think the answer is, yes, universities will die, and universities will have to pick their strengths. Those would be my two answers.
Sandeep, would you agree with that, or what's your opinion?
It's a controversial but probably real prediction. The classrooms as we know it are getting disrupted, and we think that universities are going to get disrupted further. What I'm not sure of is one type of university, how easily that will be out of business or out of the opportunity to sell, to offer education to students on campus. That's a research-driven university. Like, I don't know if a university's founding is inherently research-oriented. We often say that a lot of universities globally are more innovative than others. If you draw one correlation, almost all these innovative universities were at some point collaboration with the Defense Department of that country, right? And their founding was, and their funding was, in the early days for PhD students, for a lot of the projects that they got as part of the give from the Defense Department were highly commercial versions of very clandestine knowledge and developments at the Defense Department. And they were able to commercialize those, right? Search algorithms, GPS, many. There are even Technion in Israel and in US. So I don't know what happens to that structure of university. I believe that will sustain for a while because that's innovation-driven and research-driven. But other universities which are just pedagogy delivery businesses will have to think about competing in the new real world. So I think otherwise the future might be as interesting as you predict it to be. So we shall see.
And another interesting point that you brought up earlier is that EdTech isn't just about distribution of educational material online. There are all these other things, such as tools to help teachers teach, so teaching tools, analytics tools to adjust the pace and learning course material that's delivered to each individual student. So, Michael, you have a variety of these in your portfolio. It might be a difficult question to answer, but do you see a clear winner in which of these flavors of EdTech will become the next unicorn EdTech? As we've still not seen the big unicorn in EdTech.
Well, I would assume you're not asking which will be the next unicorn in our portfolio, but in general, in our portfolio, it's hard to say, but in general, I think it's more likely that the one or the other is appearing very soon. I mentioned the company General Assembly. They just closed a 17 million round at a valuation which is not yet a unicorn, but near to unicorn. So in case they would raise another round, I'm sure they will be a unicorn. Others, the most likely ones, we mentioned Udacity, Pluralsight, Linda, these are already the unicorns. At the end of the day, I think it's not so relevant who's a unicorn or not. At the end of the day, I think the question is who has a sustainable business model which is scalable. And I think if you have a look at a lot of EdTech startups, let's take the software business aside, because software, SaaS business, they can be very interesting, but it's not so relevant whether they're focusing on education, technology, or on automation, or on other things. These are just software engineers behind it, and then of course smart general managers, but not so specific for education. For an EdTech company focusing on content, it's relevant to have a content portfolio. High quality, but having in mind what is actually a strong publisher. Of course, you can have a very good top seller in 1 year, but it's not enough to have a sufficient business model. A lot of EdTech companies start with one product, one nice mobile app, one nice desktop solution, but it's not a portfolio. So it's like a publisher with just one book. That is not sufficient. So a successful EdTech company focusing on content has two options: either to have really a broad content portfolio, high quality, then there's a potential to have a sustainable, profitable business model, and or to add services to that content they are offering. For example, other services. You give the content for free, content as a service, and charge for other services, like tutoring, for example, like personal support, like, I don't know, or be a kind of marketplace and affiliate model. You give the content for free and get access to your users, and then you sell the user, the student, to I don't know, insurance company or something like that. Yeah, business models like that out there, and also that will be part of the EdTech community in the future. So broad portfolio and or a service provider.
Interesting. Well, I guess I can start opening the questions up to the audience. Does anybody have a particular question?
Miho, I have one unicorn for you, since you asked the unicorn question. The markets have answered that question.
Yes.
Lynda.com was acquired by LinkedIn for 1.5 billion. That's your first unicorn in EdTech. And they focus on the very space that is doing relatively well at the moment, which is vocational online video content. So there is one. That's the current hot spaces. The likes, it's comparable to Udacity, Code Academy. It's a little bit different. It's more purely vocational, more relatively low-skilled stuff. Microsoft Office, PowerPoint, that sort of thing. But it's doing very well. And they got acquired for over $1 million and are now part of LinkedIn. Yeah. So the unicorns exist.
Right. It's interesting that it became a partnership with a larger company. Is that a model that you think that these EdTechs will have to partner with a larger company in order to exist? Because we talked a little earlier about some of the problems specific to EdTechs. Perhaps, Sandeep, you could sort of elaborate on some of these.
So I think, without directly being able to answer your question, because there is no clear yes or no answer to that, it depends, one word. But so we shall get to that later. Two types of companies in EdTech. Which is more likely to be the winner to get attention and occupy a global space is likely to be the one type which delivers training online or mobile devices, as opposed to an EdTech company that enables in the background a lot of the work. So enabling companies which exist as technology platforms in the background don't gather attention from consumers, are not likely to be the biggest winners of gathering of value. But delivery companies like Linda, like General Assembly, like many others, which either sell to consumers or to schools, most likely to consumers. Benesse is an EdTech, is a unicorn, right, in Japan. Finding a Benesse anywhere else in the world is going to be hard because the cultural dynamics of Japan are way different from cultural dynamics of any other part right now, but they will evolve in the same direction. So we think that there'll be local unicorns. There will be opportunities for companies to come together and create larger global opportunities. Maybe Udacity will find local business models because it is a very predicated on corporate business model. So I think there'll be local winners. Finding a global winner will be possible in skills areas, in areas where consumers are willing to pay before they get trained, like General Assembly, Linda, etc. So we shall see. But we're excited about finding those companies.
Okay. Yeah. Yes? Oh, hang on. Hang on. Let me... I'm not a very good thrower. Here you go. Oh.
Is that a microphone?
Hello?
Oh, wow.
Sorry. I'm a journalist from Austria, and I have one question to you. We have a big, huge hidden treasure in the moment, which is Google Books. So we have 15 or 20 million books scanned by Google, and I wonder that there is always so much talking about audiovisual content. But many people, and I think also you, forget that we have this book content, and to my knowledge, nobody so far had the idea to work with that. For example, to do text mining, to do plagiarism research or originality check on 20 million scanned books. So do you have any plans to integrate that into your EdTech and educational motivations, or is that something completely different?
Well, maybe with regards to traditional education, higher education, or elementary schools education as well, I think the content from the books, from the textbooks, is nothing really unique. You could really monetize long-term in a digital space versus the publishers. I think that is not a use case. If you talk about higher education in terms of research publications and things like that, then there's a completely different play. And in our portfolio, for example, we do not we have split it between education in general and science as the specific part of the education. In our digital science portfolio is one company called Riecke, who actually has a business model by just analyzing, by doing text and data mining of scientific publications. And Reed Elsevier, Thomson Reuters have a very successful business model, also digital business model, just based on these publications from publishers worldwide. If you have a look at Scopus, for example, from Reed Elsevier, they're making hundreds of millions of money each and every year. So there's a business model. I think it's hard to say it in general for educational content because it's more or less commodity, can be replaced easily. With regard to specific high-quality special research publications, there are good business models out there and more to come, definitely.
Wow. Hi. Right, listening to Marcus, you sort of identified the biggest gap against MOOCs becoming, the next big thing, being certification, assessment, the ability to credits, yeah. Over the last couple of years, 3 years, there's been quite a lot of technological advance in the certification area with things like remote proctoring and that sort of thing. I was kind of surprised that didn't come up again as something that's really a worthwhile investment for the whole of the EdTech industry. Is there a reason for leaving that out?
It totally is. There's a company we were discussing earlier called Jumio, which does that. No, it's one of those enablers. It's one of those sort of like a Lego, like a piece of Lego that makes the house stand.
It makes the whole thing
exactly.
complete.
So no, it's critical, but it's only a piece of technology. The credit issue in MOOCs is not so much the verification issue. That exists, and many people are still skeptical, but it works. I mean, I used it last night. Anyway, not to bore you with my stories, but verification, online verification is completely possible. The CIA does it. The German government does it. It's doable. You can do your tax returns through Jumio. So it's definitely applicable to personally certified online exams. But the credit issue in MOOCs is not that. The credit issue in MOOCs is that the institutions or the systems who are able to basically endow an online course with credit shy away from that. The North American institutions, which are businesses, shy away from that because Harvard sells you a year on campus for $80,000. So why should they give any credit to something that costs maybe $200 online? So the American universities aren't really doing it yet. And the European universities, most of them, are state-run. So they couldn't care less. They're sitting there watching what the Americans are doing. So it's really a question of inertia or self-cannibalization fear amongst universities and accreditation systems, in which, by the way, Europe has a massive advantage because in the EU, because of Bologna, we have what the Americans do not have. We have not only the euro, we have ECTS, which is a currency for academic credit traded across Europe. So it could happen here, but it's not. People are just not moving fast enough.
Yeah, I mean, I see that from the academic space, and I don't want to hold this cube thing for too long. But
never mind.
Certification, online certification, and particularly in Asia, online certification with remote proctors, etc., is certainly for the corporate space, and we also have a large MOOC in the corporate space. And, we've noticed as well that getting people to the end would be much easier if we had a certification at the end of it as well. Right. I'm
just
not
a quick
going to hold
thing on
anything.
that. Just a very quick question for you, and I'd love to talk to you after that.
Yeah.
We think that if it's a technology for the sake of enabling remote proctoring, it's interesting. But when applied to a differentiating opportunity for the buyer, it's very exciting. There's a company called HackerRanks, which is out of the Silicon Valley. What they do is they use the same technology from companies such as ProctorEU and others, which multiple companies exist, 20 in each country, perhaps 10 in each country. But they leverage that technology to select the best programmers for the employers remotely, which is awesome, right? If I have a very specific high-value task and my best programmer is sitting Far East, and I can find that person most accurately and quickly through your technology product, and that brings me differentiated value as a buyer, I'll pay for that service, which is enabled by the technology. So I love that opportunity, as opposed to just investing in a company that does excellent proctoring. So that's...
My name is Vishnu. I run a company called Law Pundits, focusing on online legal education mainly. My question is to you, Marcus. You told that universities might get replaced because of the advance in online education. But what about the additional things that comes along with it, like the pub crawl or the frat parties or something like that? Do you think that is replaceable at all? That's the college experience, right?
Not at all. That's completely irreplaceable. And I wanted to add something which I forgot to mention is the universities, I mean, if you wanted to stick to this controversial thing I put forward, and I do believe that. I do believe the number of universities we have today probably will eventually bleed out unless they get on the bandwagon and specialize where they're strong. But the one thing I was going to add to my point was I could even architecturally envisage how the universities that survive will change. You will see far fewer, perhaps no, big lecture halls. You won't need big lecture halls. You can do the stuff online. You'll see lots and lots and lots of small conference rooms where that inter-student learning can actually happen. That's not at all how universities look today. University of Bochum has just built another 10,000-seater lecture hall. That's probably going to go down as the worst investment in the German education system in the last 5 years because nobody needs it. So I think the on-campus experience is completely irreplaceable, and it is actually at least as much the on-campus experience, the quality of the on-campus experience, for which the top universities in America charge so much money. It's not just the faculty. Yes, they all have great faculty, but to be together with other students who are as smart as you are in facilities like that, that's irreplaceable. And that's probably worth today. In fact, Jörg Dreger, who's a famous education expert in Germany, former senator for education in Hamburg, he said on this point of or alluding to the question of, is it still worth sending my child, if I could afford it, is it still worth sending my child to a really expensive on-campus experience in the light of MOOCs? And he's a big proponent of MOOCs. And he said, well, actually, if my child get into a really top university, it's worth every penny. Every penny, because nothing can replace the on-campus experience. However, if it's a second or third tier university, I begin to question that. That's what he said, and I would concur. But nothing can replace a top-notch online campus, a top-notch on-campus experience.
And then we'll go. Okay. We'll first, and then you ask your question first.
Okay, I'm Julie Summer from the University of Western Australia. Not Harvard, but we are one of the top 100 research-intensive universities in the world. And I have a rather different question for you, actually. As investors, if you really wanted to solve a huge problem that the world of universities has, and it's been my experience, this is everywhere in the world, it is that there's a sustainable challenge that we have, and that's what our faculty actually do. We can't seem to shift them, no matter what we do, to do things differently. So I'm just wondering what sort of partnership we could set up with you to solve that particular problem. It's to all of you. Ideas, please.
Could you amplify the problem? To shift the faculty, you mean?
Well, the faculty are the people doing the research and typically doing the teaching, usually with assistants. And every one of us working in the university, it cannot scale up. We cannot scale up because of the resistance. And it's actually very difficult to understand resistance and very difficult to overcome. So,
it's an excellent challenge because a lot of the faculty globally are incentivized in research universities to get research, donations, capital, grant, etc. That motivation system may have to be changed, but that's not technology driven. You can create upswell of student demand in faculty teaching hours through the use of technologies which enable faculty to feel like stars. So creating stars out of faculty in the minds of students through technology is possible, and there are lecture capture enables that really nicely, where when we go and implement our lecture capture solution in universities, the biggest resistance is from the faculty. In every scenario we've seen, faculty say no. It takes maybe one or two faculty to get started with wearing a mic, being present and aware of the camera in front of them, their laptop feed going into the camera as well, and students really, really like it. Then the students demand, in every case, that the faculty not take off the mic, show up on time, and be ready for camera. Because students really find value in that product. So if the students are empowered with a new learning opportunity which enables them to learn in a more personalized fashion through technology in the classroom, possibly you can engage faculty more deeply. We've done that in every case. It takes some servicing, but it works. But it's not an easy answer.
And you had a question? Oh, sorry. What's the time?
Throw it, Julie.
So this is our last question, I think.
Must be something more exciting coming on there.
Thank you. Just a quick question, Frederik Chatou from Bertelsmann Education. We heard about how very strong universities in the US are going to drive out mediocre universities because they will be able to use up all the space and scale up their content, so to speak. But my question then would be, what happens to the students that are just not able to enter those programs? I mean, where are those supposed to go? Because going to the University of Harvard is not only a question of being able to pay $80,000 a year, but it's also a question of being able to enter that university. So what do you suppose is going to happen with those people?
Well, I think some of them do not even need a university degree. Some people go for Harvard. Already today it's possible to go to Harvard without having the money, because they have special programs for that. But I think some people will, at the end of the day, make the decision on their own, even in case they could afford to go to Harvard. Is it worth for me, or will I make an online course, get a kind of, I don't know, Udacity nano degree for special IT skills, and I have then the proof of employability and can already start my career at the age of 22, for example. I don't have to go to university. So I think that is a challenge. The big and tier 1 universities, as you mentioned, they will still continue to exist. Maybe they will also have a kind of special online program for people who cannot afford to join on campus. But I think at the end of the day, it is not necessary for each and everyone who either could afford to go to Harvard or who cannot afford. It's not so much the question, is there only a Harvard? No, there are other options also. So that would be my answer. It will be more flexible.
And I think, I'm not sure, there is actually one project that, if you haven't heard of it, go check it out. The Arizona State University, which is not Harvard, have a joint venture with edX, which is called the Freshman Academy. Check that out. That's a complete freshman year, full credit on edX, online exams, the whole shebang for a rock bottom price. And I think that's, models like this will become the mass university education offering, but I fear that products comparable to what Arizona State and edX are doing today will reach far more students than classical universities are reaching today. But at the same time, the gap in terms of sort of cerebral, intellectual, academic rigor will increase. The top universities will get better, and the rest will sort of try to hang on. But at least it'll be less expensive and it'll be more accessible.
Unfortunately, we have to wrap up this session. We'll run out of time.
Right.
But please give a big round of applause for our panelists, Miho, Michael, Sandeep, and Marcus. We're going to take a few minutes here and switch out the stage for our next presentation.